I want to sing a song for you that I wrote a mere 3 weeks ago. It's been kind of reverberating around the country in the different state campaigns. It goes like this. I am asking everything you have to give. I am asking everything you have to give.
Hello, everyone. I'm Iris Iglarz, president of the Northwest Suburban Chapter of the National Organization for Women, and I'm pleased to welcome all participants and co-sponsors. This is an important event as evidenced by the distinguished group of organizations and leaders joining us tonight. We will provide contact information for all these organizations. Please reach out, and even better, join any organizations that interest you. And if you're interested in joining any of the NOW chapters in Illinois, we can provide information on that too. The Northwest Suburban chapter has a far-flung membership that primarily goes all the way from Evanston on the east, up north through Highland Park, west to Deerfield, then south through Northbrook, Glenview, Skokie, and then west to Wheeling, Palatine, Arlington Heights, and Mount Prospect, and many places in between. We're of course dedicated to advancing equality for all women, and our mission includes defending reproductive rights, standing up against abuse and violence against women, and supporting the inclusion of diverse voices and experiences. We're starting this evening off with our featured speakers, Emily Worth and Melissa Wyden, two women with deep commitments to women's rights. Emily Worth, a staff attorney at the American Civil Liberties Union of Illinois since 2014, focuses on women's rights and reproductive rights. She is a 2006 graduate of the University of Chicago and a 2011 graduate of Harvard Law School. Before joining the ACLU of Illinois, she was first a Skadden Fellow at the Shriver Center for Poverty Law in Chicago, and then a fellow at the National Women's Law Center in Washington, D.C. Melissa Wyden has been a board member of Personal PAC for the past 12 years, serving as its third board chair. She currently is a volunteer attorney with the ACLU Judicial Bypass Project, helping young women in harm's way due to Illinois' dangerous parental notice of abortion, P&A law. And she is co-founder and chief administrative officer of the First Women's Bank, which focuses on lending to women-owned businesses. Take it away, Emily and Melissa.
Involve one of their parents or other adult family members in the abortion decision. The ACLU of Illinois does operate what we call our Judicial Bypass Coordination Project. So we have a network of attorneys like Melissa who volunteer their time pro bono to help young people through the judicial bypass process, explain to them how the process works, help them prepare, and then actually go with them for the meeting in front of the judge, the hearing, in order to try to help them get this judicial waiver so they can have the abortion without having to involve one of those adult family members that for whatever reason, they're not able to notify about their decision. Anyone who's interested in learning more about judicial bypass or our project or the resources that we have, our website is www.ilbypass.org. We have a hotline. We operate 7 days a week. We try to be accommodating in terms of evening hours and weekend hours as well, because young people may not always be available during normal business hours. But we want to make sure that any young person under 18 who is subject to the Parental Notice of Abortion Act knows what their rights are, knows that they have the option of judicial bypass if that is the best option for them, and can be connected to an attorney to help them through that process.
Great. Melissa, why do we need to repeal this law, and how does the law harm young people?
So to understand exactly why this law is so harmful, I think I should start by giving you an overview of the judicial bypass process. Emily did a great job of sort of giving you the legal framework, but let me sort of tell you what it's like for a young person who's going through this. So, you know, it begins when a young person finds out that she's pregnant. She determines, knows, feels that she's not ready to become a mother. And she also knows that she can't tell her parents. So she's on her own, and she has to figure out what to do next. So she has to first find a healthcare professional who can help her understand and evaluate her options. She needs to figure out how she's going to pay for the procedure. And then, because of the parental notice law, she has to go to court. But first, she has to call the bypass hotline. The ACLU has done an unbelievable job of training attorneys, putting together a program that is very easy for the healthcare providers, for the lawyers, and for the young people. And so the young person usually will find out about the requirement and the hotline from her healthcare provider. She'll call the bypass hotline, and the ACLU will connect her with a trained attorney to help her through the process. So she now needs to meet with this person who's a complete stranger. And then she needs to talk about these incredibly personal details of her life. She has to explain, you know, the circumstances surrounding her pregnancy. She has to talk about why she's decided to have an abortion. She has to explain why she can't tell her parent. And then she has to appear in person in court in the Daly Center if she lives in Chicago. It's not so easy for young people to get to the Daly Center, to leave school without being penalized, without their parents finding out, to find transportation downtown. And then finally, she has to testify in court before a judge, before her lawyer, before a court reporter. And she has to testify about these incredibly intimate details of her life. And she has to convince the judge that she is mature enough to make this decision on her own. I mean, this process is incredibly traumatizing and difficult for a young person. It imposes these really, these severe, often insurmountable obstacles for a young person who needs an abortion. It also delays access to abortion care, which can make the procedure more expensive or more complicated. This law is really the opposite of what a young person who needs an abortion should be going through. They need support from healthcare providers, from people they can trust. They don't need legal burdens that traumatize them and cause them more harm.
And if I might chime in, Iris, because I anticipate some folks might be wondering, Melissa referred to, you know, going to the Daly Center, for example. Right now during COVID, we are doing hearings remotely, as most court proceedings are happening, but that can actually add a whole new layer of burden for some young people. They have to have access to some kind of device and the internet in order to get on Zoom. They have to make sure that they're going to be in a safe location where no one might overhear their conversation or accidentally walk in on them while the hearing is happening. And so, you know, having, we are doing remote hearings, and that alleviates burdens such as like travel downtown, but it creates new burdens for a lot of young people in terms of technology and privacy as well.
Melissa, getting back to the young people, can you talk a little bit about what are some of the typical life situation and experiences that the young people who have to seek judicial bypass have to deal with?
Sure. So I represented over 30 young women in judicial bypass proceedings. And I would say one of the most common fears that my clients have experienced is fear of being kicked out of their house and becoming homeless if their parents find out that they are pregnant. In many cases, these young people have seen an older sibling or a cousin get kicked out of the house for getting pregnant at a young age, and they feel very confident that they will be cut off from their family and kicked out of their house if their parents find out. Some of them are genuinely fearful that they'll be forced to carry the pregnancy to term if a parent finds out that they're pregnant. Virtually all of my clients were worried that they would experience some kind of physical or emotional abuse if their parents learned that they're pregnant. I had one client who explained to me that her relationship with her mother was so toxic that when they fought, she would cut herself, and that she felt very certain that if she were to have to tell her mother, that her mother would be so furious at her that she would harm herself after that. Several of my clients didn't want to tell their mothers about their pregnancies because of the hardships that their mothers were going through and the burdens that they were carrying. One of my clients' fathers had died recently, and her mother was working several jobs, and she just couldn't bear to tell her mother about her pregnancy and add to all of the stress that her mother was going through. I had several clients whose parents were depressed, and they really did not want to add more suffering to their parents' lives. The great majority of the young women that I worked with had plans for their future. They wanted to go to college, and they had careers in mind. They knew that having a baby would prevent them from living the life that they wanted to. And I would say many of my clients recognized that they were just too young to be a parent. Many of them talked about wanting to wait until they had enough money to raise a child and to have a family. One of my clients told the judge in the hearing in tears that she couldn't have a child when she was just a child herself. So I would say without exception, my clients were mature, thoughtful young women who, even in the midst of this incredibly stressful and emotional and frightening situation, they were fully capable of making independent and informed decisions about their pregnancy. Very, very clear.
Well, it's wonderful that you're helping these people. And thank you so much for doing that. Going back to Emily, based on your experience, to what extent does the law prevent young people from getting the abortions that they desire?
We do know that, as Melissa mentioned, many of the clients that we represent in the judicial bypass process they know that their families are opposed to abortion, and they are very concerned that if their parents or other family members were to find out about the situation, they would try to prevent them from seeking out the abortion care that they want. We've had situations arise where we have started down the path of representing someone in this process, and then somehow their parents did find out, someone they thought they could trust revealed it to their parents or something like that. And parents have taken steps like confiscating phones, confiscating car keys, not allowing young people out of the house for weeks or months on end to make sure that they can't access abortion care. I did have a client once who was already a parent of a young child who was pregnant for the second time. And during her first pregnancy, she had suggested that she wanted an abortion to her parents. And they basically kept her home for 9 months until she gave birth, because they were opposed to that idea. So she knew that subsequently, if she was going to have an abortion, she needed to be able to do it on her own. The other thing, we don't have exact numbers of, exactly how many young people wanted abortion care, but weren't able to access it. But another thing we often worry about is those who are deterred from even considering the option of abortion beyond, initial research when they find out that this law exists. Certainly, we don't know the exact numbers, but certainly we know that there are many young people who either don't consider even trying to access abortion care or make attempts to access abortion care and are prevented by their parents.
Well, my understanding is that abortion is an exception to the general rule that parents have to give consent to medical care for children under 18. Why is that the case?
So actually, it's not so much that abortion is an exception to the general rule of requiring parental consent. Abortion is actually an exception to the rule that when you're pregnant as the person under 18, you're actually allowed to make all of your own medical decisions without forced parental involvement. So a person under 18 who gets pregnant in Illinois and decides to continue the pregnancy has no obligation to involve their parents in any step along the way in that decision. They can consent to all their prenatal care, all their care during childbirth. They can make decisions about things like epidural or cesarean section. Once the child is born, they have the full right to make all decisions, medical decisions for their own child. And for none of those types of healthcare is a young person required to involve their parents unless they so choose. So abortion is an exception, but what it's an exception to is the rule that once a young person is pregnant, we allow them to make all their own medical decisions without forced parental involvement. The reason we do that is because these are time-sensitive types of medical care that can have long-term repercussions, and we don't want young people delaying because they're afraid of how their parents might react. So we recognize that that's the case, and we allow them to access prenatal care and also other types of sensitive health care like STI testing and treatment, care related to sexual assault. We allow young people under 18 to access those types of care without forced parental involvement. And then we single out abortion and we require parental notice only when the particular type of care that the young person wants once they are pregnant is to terminate that pregnancy.
So Emily, what will be the effect of repealing this law?
So if the law is repealed, then a young person who decides to have an abortion will be treated the same as a young person who decides to continue their pregnancy. They'll have the full right to make that decision for themselves, and also the full right to decide who they do or do not want to involve in the course of that decision. And we know from decades of research that the majority of young people voluntarily involve at least one of their parents or another a trusted adult in an abortion decision. This has been borne out over decades and decades of research studies. So if parental notice of abortion in Illinois is repealed, it will still be the case that in the majority of situations, a young person under 18 accessing abortion care will involve a parent in that decision. But for those who cannot, for many of the reasons that Melissa described, for example, they will not have to navigate the burdensome, challenging, potentially traumatizing judicial bypass process, or face the potential consequences that they're afraid of, like being forced to continue a pregnancy that they don't want, or being kicked out, or facing physical or emotional abuse. We will trust young people to know who is a safe source of support when it comes to this decision. Most of them will choose their parents as one of those people that they reach out to, but not all of them will, and we'll respect that decision as well.
Melissa, you have anything to add to that?
No, I just think that all of the work that's being done by the really wonderful coalition of reproductive justice organizations in Illinois is so important, because this law does so much harm to young people, and this is the time we absolutely need to repeal this law this session, and we need everybody's help to get it done.
Great. Emily and Melissa will be sticking around for our discussion in a few minutes, but now we're going to discuss the next steps for repeal and a call to action. So I'm going to welcome Grace Barter, who is the Special Events and Outreach Coordinator for the Personal PAC, and reintroduce Alexandra, or Al, Eidenberg of We Will and Vote Mama. So Grace and Al, you want to join?
Yes, thank you, Iris. We're excited to be back. And just so everyone knows, we are on Facebook Live. I do want to remind friends about that. So we are on Facebook Live. For those of you that are watching on Facebook, we're having a conversation about repealing parental notice here in Illinois, the step to make Illinois 100% pro-choice. At this important event, we have amazing co-sponsors here with us today, and Grace is with Personal PAC, and she's going to be sharing those next steps with us. I know that a lot of folks had questions when they were hearing Emily and Melissa speaking. Please feel free to drop those questions in the chat. I am capturing those as we go along. Also, you'll notice there's a Q&A tab at the bottom where you can also drop questions. And after we talk about calls to action, we're also going to do a discussion where we're going to directly answer those questions. We're going to bring some more people in the fold to do that along with us. Grace, it's been such a pleasure to work with you, and please take the lead on discussing those next steps. And I'm going to go ahead and get your screens going for you.
Great, thank you. I just see in the chat that someone can't hear you, Al. Oh, just kidding. Okay. Are we all good on audio?
You,
Okay.
because I knew that my volume wasn't working earlier. I was trying to turn down that music for everyone and I turned everything down. So I apologize.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you. Hi, everyone. Like Al said, I'm Grace. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the special events and outreach coordinator at Personal Pack. I'm really excited to see so many people here and also really grateful for the chance to speak briefly with you all about some of the easy ways to support the repeal P&A efforts, excuse me. So first of all, I want to give a huge shout out to the 20 plus incredible organizations who are co-sponsoring this event tonight and doing really important work like Melissa just said. So we hope that you'll follow them along on social media. If you don't already, you can see them up on your screen. Feel free to do a screenshot if you want to check those out later and follow along with their work and maybe get involved if you have the time. I also want to highlight a really great resource, which is the repealpna.org website, which I think Al might try to screen share. It's got all sorts of educational materials. If it's not up now, I recommend you visiting it after tonight, and especially because it will continue to have new updates and new items to get involved with. So we'll put a link in the chat to that website as well. I'll do that in just a second. So after tonight, our hope is that you're feeling inspired and informed to get involved in this important fight because your voice really does matter and we need everyone we can get to make this happen. So I'm going to quickly walk you through a couple of action items that we hope you can take tonight or in the next couple of weeks and months. And we can send this all out in an email too, so no need to frantically get it all down. So first off is super simple, super low time commitment is sharing what you learned tonight. So can you reach out to 3 to 5 friends to tell them about this event, about P&A, why it needs to be repealed? You can share the great website, the co-sponsors, any facts that you find, super shocking or interesting or important. So like I said, pretty simple there. The next is amplifying. So amplifying the repeal P&A efforts. And we hope that you can do this by sharing on your own social media accounts. So of course, just the more people who know, the more powerful this cause will be. And we think it's not a big reach, but people will be more interested if it's coming from a friend or a family member rather than an organization they might not really know about. So we are happy to provide graphics and suggested language to help you with this. If you're not quite sure what to say or what to post, we will happily provide that material for you. Next up, we need folks to contact their elected officials about P&A. So this can be done by phone, email, social media. The Repeal P&A website that I mentioned makes this pretty easy for you. You can send an automated email to elected officials, and you can also make phone calls. It's really quite simple, and I think Al might want to speak a little bit more on this item.
Yeah, so I know that everyone here with us tonight, we're all at this various level with our activism, engaging the community, working with our legislators. I'm really excited because we do have Senator Cristina Castro here with us tonight, and she is one of my personal favorite senators. For those of you that work often in Springfield, either virtually or in person, you get to know the personalities and the folks there, and Senator Castro is one of those people that you know that you can rely on. She is a brilliant, hardworking legislator, and she's one of the co-sponsors of this bill. And I wanted to have her speak a little bit about this bill, but also, the folks that serve our communities are everyday people. And I know that at many of our organizations like NOW and We Will, one of the things we focus on is creating that comfort level and working with our legislators. And so Christine is a great place to start because she just makes everything very comfortable and warm and easy to understand the process of legislation. Right now, this particular bill has two key sponsors. And so Speaker Welch is the sponsor on the House side. And then on the Senate side, we have Senator Sims, LG Sims. And so those are the people that are the key folks on it. And then from there, we build on the co-sponsors. And so Senator Castro is one of those co-sponsors. We also have Representative Robin Gable here with us. She's a co-sponsor on the House side. And it's really important that we build those co-sponsors. And not all the time does somebody want to be a co-sponsor because it's putting their name to the bill a lot, but sometimes they can just be a yes vote. So we'll talk a little bit more about how to communicate with your electeds, but it's a really special opportunity to have the senator here with us. Senator, tell us what's going on. It's been such an exciting time in Illinois. Obviously, this bill is very important to all of our organizations. What's the scoop?
So, well, let's thank you, everyone. I see a lot of champions here. It's good to see you all. Well, you know, today's just an exciting day all around, right? I mean, there's this sense of change. You know, the orange blob is gone. We have a new administration who actually, you know, when you talk about the predecessor, I won't mention his name, but he should go off into the wind. You know, he attacked choice considerably, right? We as a state have done a lot to protect choice. If you look at, I find fascinating a map that you see when you look at all the states around us, how anti-choice they are, and yet you see this fantastic blue state that's Illinois. And that is a tribute to many of you who have advocated and pushed hard to make sure a woman's right to choose is continuously protected. And we have enjoyed passing many of those measures, including the RHA. And so I think one of the things when we talk about the PNA bill, it has to be obviously reintroduced, just kind of some lingo as far as the legislative. Every 2 years, we start a new General Assembly. The bills of the 101st kind of go aside once the 101st General Assembly walks away. Now it's the 102nd, which is a 2-year session. The bill will be reintroduced. I'm assuming the sponsors will remained. And a lot of the co-sponsors will just need to re-sign in support of the bill. So this is a great opportunity for all of you to look at who's on the old co-sponsorship and reach out to your legislators and talk about, hey, we're reintroducing this bill. Will you please add yourself as a co-sponsor to the bill again? Most of the times you'll get absolutely. And it's a great opportunity for you all to engage in that process and talk about the importance of moving this bill. Whatever session we have, I mean, the Senate can meet remotely to some extent. Our rules allow for that meeting remotely and legislative remotely. The only difference is we have to have a physical quorum somewhere, but we can go ahead and vote. The House doesn't have that, so they would physically have to go in and vote. So right now, I think we're in a process. The new General Assembly has been sworn in. So you will hear committee assignments shortly, leadership posts shortly, if you've not heard some already. And then we will get back to legislating. The Senate canceled its January 25th week. We will be back February 9th. And I believe the House, and Robin probably can answer to that, meets the week prior back in Springfield. So, you know, I think this pandemic has been challenging in a lot of ways, right? A lot of bills that Alexandria and I were looking to move forward just pretty much went on the wayside as we've been dealing with a pandemic. But the neat thing about Zoom, as you're seeing here, it's almost a lot easier to get a hold of folks. It's a lot, maybe not as personal as a visit, but you're still able to keep in contact with your legislator, keep them up to date on some of the issues, but also to hear about what we're doing now. On this issue alone, we're talking about social justice and the impact of what the pillars the Black Caucus pillars that we just passed. This is a very big social justice piece. And when we talk about this, and I'm sure Emily and Melissa could attest to this, when you talk about the people who are impacted by the PNA, they traditionally come from communities of color, communities that are continually still have stigmas around abortion, and who have challenges, some who don't have the means, as was described earlier. This is an important issue that needs to be addressed now, especially in this climate. Obviously, there'll be a lot of pressure at the federal level to repeal the Hyde Amendment, but we shouldn't stop. We should work on this as well, so that way Illinois is 100% pro-choice. So that's pretty much what I have to add, folks. Reach out to your legislators. It's a great opportunity to reach out as you're reintroducing the bill. Give them a bill number, ask them to sign. And then you can talk about a lot of those issues, why it's important. One thing to add to this co-sponsorships is, those members as well push caucus leadership to call a bill faster and sooner. So I think that's also important when you talk about with your legislators, the importance of signing on, but also to encourage the leadership to start moving that bill. I see the amazing Terry Cosgrove is on there, but it's important, right? And so we have to continue pushing. This is going to be an issue that I see that is very important to all of us, including many pro-choice women and men that are out there, to get this done and finally over the hump, and we'll be 100% pro-choice. So thank you all.
Thank you, Senator. Grace, I'm going back to your screen so we can do that step 4, which is also important.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so step 4 is probably the most important item. So while every contact is important, directly talking to legislators and talking to specific people who need to hear from us is going to be most impactful. So that's why we're setting up virtual meetings with key elected officials who need to hear from constituents about P&A and why they believe it needs to be repealed. So I know that might sound a little intimidating. I certainly would have thought so a year or so ago, but it's going to be really critical and your voice is going to be really important. So, and I should note, you won't have to do it alone. You won't have to handle the logistics or figure out what to do. We will help you with all of that. So if that's something that you are interested in learning more about, or if you're ready to go, we have a really brief questionnaire that I'll put in the chat that we would love for you to fill out. So our last slide has the 2 kind of important links that you can note, and again, they'll be in the chat. So again, we want you to share, contact, meet, and amplify. Sorry, those were out of order. Again, and being the setting up those meetings will be really important. So that's all I have for tonight. I'm really grateful for your time and your support of this issue. And hopefully you're ready to get this done in 2021 like we are. And again, that questionnaire will be super important if you're interested in getting involved or learning more. So back to you, Al.
Thank you, Grace. It is just an absolute honor to be with so many of you. You know, a couple people in the comments are mentioning how being in the virtual world really allows us to work throughout the state of Illinois and involve even more organizations. And so although I think many of us often get zoomed out, it really is pretty powerful that so many amazing leaders and organizations in our community can be here tonight together to work on this important legislation. I know that many of you have questions, and I see some banter going on. And so first of all, Terry let us know that there are some new co-sponsors, so I'm gonna let him talk about that in a little bit. But I do wanna share something really important, and I think that as we all grow, and Grace and I were just talking about this the other day, where as we get older, sometimes terms and the way we refer to things transition. And so one of the things that's really important, and I think is really important for all of us, and I think that we work hard to use the best terms for folks that they wanna be referred to. You'll see that some people here tonight might have their name listed with she, her, or him, his, and that's because that's how they prefer to be referred to. One of the important things in this particular space is that we want to make sure that when we're talking about young folks, young people, that we're not identifying them as women and girls. Not everyone identifies as a woman or girl that can get pregnant, and so it's important that we use some of those terms like people or folks, or a more general term. I did see some banter going on, and I really take the lead from young folks on this, and young people want to be called young people. And as we use these terms, it's important that we address people the way they want to be addressed. And so here tonight, I think we're all on that climb. We're all trying to do better. We're trying to create that change. One of the things that we ask that you kind of add to your repertoire is when we're talking about this important topic and that repeal of parental notice, we refer to the folks that are affected and, that are a part of this as young people. And so, and I think that we're all on that learning curve. And so thank you for learning with us on that one. We're going to be diving into doing some Q&A and going over things while we're chatting. We're going to be seeing those links dropped in there. So you're going to see momentarily that Grace is dropping links for you. It's really important that that we connect with our legislators. And so, you know, we talked about that amplification. We talked about that process of contacting our legislators. So there's kind of two things that go on at once. We have that amplification in the community. That's where all of these organizations are being loud and letting everyone know in the community that they're focused on something. But then we have this other component, and that's working with the legislature. And the legislature can hear from us because the community is amplifying, but really it comes down to the numbers, and we need the numbers on this in order to pass the legislation. I'm going to ask that the folks that are here in the inner circle, that are on the inside of the event, we're going to be coming into that discussion portion. And if you want to join us for the discussion and answer questions, I just ask that you turn your video on so that we can see you. Although we like seeing your name, we like seeing you even more. So Melissa, Emily, Terry, any of you that want to join the conversation, we'd love for you to turn your video on. You know, there are so many ways that we can make a difference on this particular topic and create that change. So follow the links. You know, not every legislator needs a call. And so, for example, you just heard Senator Castro talking about how she's all in, she's a co-sponsor. We know that Representative Robin Gable is a co-sponsor. So if you're going to call your legislator and they're already supportive of the legislation, that's a moment where you can say, thank you for supporting the legislation. But there's also other legislators that it's very important that we change where they're at right now. We know from the prior running of this legislation where they stand, and we need to move them from a no to a yes. And so if you could follow this link that's being provided here by Grace, this will allow us to capture some information and learn if you're in one of the districts where we have a legislator that could use some additional conversations, and maybe that special conversation and that special coffee date. And so I do see some questions coming in here. And so I see Allison asking about Speaker Welch, since he was the previous sponsor. And so Allison, one of the things, and I'm going to kind of kickstart us with this, and I'd love to hear from Bridget on this one. Maybe Terry knows a little bit more about this. So in my entire life, I've only known of Speaker Madigan. He has served longer than I've been alive. So this is my first experience having a new speaker in Illinois. I'm pretty excited. I'm a big fan of Representative Welch, now Speaker Welch. He is a hardworking man and he's terrific. In my experience, the speaker doesn't run legislation. And, you know, Michael Madigan never ran legislation. He helped his folks, he helped the Democrats in his caucus usher through legislation. He helped usher through legislation, but he never ran it. I do think Representative Welch, now Speaker Welch, might be running legislation, but we don't know. What we do know is the speaker's definitely supportive of repealing this. And because he's supportive, we can trust that our legislation is going to get ran, and that's really important. But that is a great question, and I'd love to defer that question to either Terry or Bridget. And Terry, I'd love for you to, and I know that your camera's off, so I'm just going to get your video going right now. Bridget, I know that often when we're chatting, sometimes just kind of with internet things, sometimes having your video on is not always doable, but I see you here. Hi, Bridget. It's good to see you. So Bridget, do you have any updates for us on either sponsors or co-sponsors, and if Speaker Welch is going to be running this important legislation?
So actually, Speaker Welch is still getting things in order. He's only been Speaker for a week, and I think we need to give him a moment to get his staff in order. The House is a little delayed because of not knowing who was going to be Speaker until a week ago. We just recently got the House calendar. We still need to know what the committee assignments are, who are going to be chairs in committee, who are going to be on his leadership team. I think it is a really good question. Usually, a speaker or a Senate president for that matter, and this is not just specific to Illinois, usually they don't carry a lot of legislation. So I think that is something we need to get an answer from Speaker Welch. I think that if he decides that he needs to hand it off, it would have nothing to do with a lack of support for it. It would be because of his new responsibilities. But I also know that there are several other fantastic members in the House who would also be great sponsors. So I'm not worried about us having a good lead sponsor.
Thank you, Bridget. That's a super important update. And I think we're all waiting to see how things shake out. And it's a new day, not only here in Illinois, but also in our nation. Terry, it seems like you have some updates on some new co-sponsors. Tell us more.
Not really. I know there's a lot of people that are interested in getting involved, but I don't have any specific updates. But what I did want to say about legislative visits in my previous life, before Personal PAC, I actually worked for a few state representatives in their offices. And I can tell you that there is nothing more attention getting than people making appointments to come in and see their legislator, which we can't do now, obviously, but a Zoom is the next best thing, especially with a few other constituents. I have to tell you, when it's worth hundreds of emails, postcards, and letters to make a personal phone call or schedule a visit and tell a legislator why a bill is so important. The legislators that I worked with, we were required to dust all the surfaces, clean up the office, dress well that day. I mean, obviously on Zoom, that doesn't matter, but it underscores the importance of the personal contact. And especially if you have any relationship with that legislator from a campaign or on any other issue. So I would really encourage people, if you live in a district where we need you, and I just want to take a little bit of an issue with one thing you said, Alex. The people who are anti-choice are never going to vote for this. So we don't really need to, we have enough pro-choice state representatives and senators in Springfield. Our job is just to rally the troops and get 30 votes in the Senate and 60 in the House. So I would and what's going to make that happen is really that legislators feel the personal contact. And so once we get your address, we can figure out which district you live in, and then we will reach out to you personally and tell you that, you have a legislator who's on the fence, or someone we haven't confirmed as a yes vote, or that it's a legislator who is very vocally in support of it, and we need to encourage them to take a leadership role, not only to co-sponsor the bill, but help us round up the 60 and 30 votes. So that's my advice today, that people really take seriously the personal conversations that they have either on the phone or through a Zoom meeting with your legislator, because they will understand that is that how important this bill is. And the final thing I want to finish with, our opponents, unfortunately, are very, very good at this. They call their legislators, they ask for meetings, they are, the best way I can put it, they're up in their face. And those of us that speak to legislators here all the time, I hear it, Terry, I've heard from 60 people in opposition to the RHA, and I've only heard from 2 people who are pro-choice. So it is really up to us to counter the anti-choice people that are going to pull out all the stops to try to prevent this bill from passing. And the way that we do that is to let our pro-choice legislators know that we have their back, and that there are people in their districts that really want this to happen, and that good policy is good politics, and vice versa.
Terry, you just hit on something really important, and that is there are certain legislators that you can turn over and others you can't. Some folks are just anti-choice and they're not coming over, and I completely agree with you there, and we're not going to be able to spin those people. But there's other people where they have been on the fence, and those on the fencers are really the ones that need to be turned over. Terry, and as we all know, everyone's in that different spectrum of where they're at on their activism. You just were talking those hard numbers, and so this is a numbers game, friends. And so 30 votes in the Senate, 60 in the House, and it's a numbers game, and you count up your numbers, and this is a roll call experience. And so working with Personal PAC, Planned Parenthood, these amazing organizations, ACLU, all of these great organizations have feet on the ground, or virtual feet on the ground in Springfield, where they're making sure that those number counts are happening. But there's some people that are going to be a little bit harder to turn over. And Terry, you hit that nail on the head, where we have to focus on maybe that handful of folks that, those folks in order to get those numbers over the edge, which is just so important. I do want to make note that we have a couple electeds with us. And so we do have Representative Shea Collins, who's joined us. Welcome, welcome. We also have Trustee Alyssa Gable, who's here. And friends, if I'm missing any electeds, I keep kind of zooming through the list. I know we have Ben Head from Jan Schakowsky's office that's here. We have Eileen Dordak, who's also with Personal PAC, who's joined us on the guest side as well. If I'm missing any of our electeds, if you could just raise your hand on that side, I can definitely announce you. And we do have questions coming in. So let's go with some of these questions. And so, and Amber asks, what constitutes notice? Mail, call, email, and does there need to be a receipt of notice? I feel like this question could be really good for Emily or Melissa.
Sure, I'm happy to answer that question. So the Illinois law contemplates that primarily notice will be done over the phone. So that someone, either the provider themselves or someone working at their clinic, will call and speak with the adult family member who's getting the notice over the phone. Sometimes mail is possible when phone notice can't be done, but it requires at least trying that phone notice first before you can move to mail notice. And then the provider is obligated to document in the patient's file that they've done the notice in order to comply with the law. Or for a young person who has to go through the judicial bypass, the provider is required to document in the file with the paperwork from the court that the young person has gotten the judicial bypass.
Thank you, Emily. So another question is from Samantha, what % of people who seek the bypass receive them and can get their abortions? And so, Emily, I feel like many of these things are falling under your foyer. Please, friends, feel free to chime in if this question really feels like something you're very aware of and can answer.
I have the answer at hand, so I'll jump in since no one else immediately did. So the ACLU of Illinois, our judicial bypass project, represents the vast majority of young people who go through the bypass process in the state of Illinois. And we have received the judicial waiver in over 99.5% of those cases. So at the end of the day, ultimately, almost every single young person who goes through the process gets the bypass. But they have to navigate these challenges around getting out of school or getting into a private location for a Zoom hearing, explaining very intimate, very personal details about their life to this complete stranger, this judge. They have to, it delays their care, oftentimes pushing them later into pregnancy where their options are more limited or things are more expensive. It's really just a series of essentially unnecessary hurdles, because at the end of the day, in 99.5+% of cases, the judges have said, I see that this young person is clearly sufficiently mature and well enough informed to make this decision for themselves. So we're making them jump through a bunch of hoops just to jump through the hoops, essentially, and then delaying their care and potentially exposing them to things like a loss of confidentiality. I saw someone put in the chat, you know, if particularly in smaller communities outside Chicago, the risk that you may run into someone you actually know when you're there at the courthouse for your hearing, that is a very real concern. We've had clients have to drive, you know, over an hour out of their way to go to a different courthouse in a different county because someone they know does work at the local courthouse. And so although most young people that we help are able to be successful, the process in and of itself is a huge burden and an unnecessary one at that.
Thank you, Emily. I have, you know, and Oren, I know that your video is not on. I want to turn your video on. And Terry and Oren, this is a question for you guys. A couple of folks are asking, how can men engage more in this? You know, and I know that, you know, Oren, you founded this great organization, Men for Choice. We have Ben Head with us. I know he's one of the Men for Choice guys. Terry, you're the leader at Personal Pack, and so we know that it takes male allies and so many things. Tell us a little bit more about how men can help support this repeal and what that looks like.
No one can do a better job on this question than Oren, so I'm going to punt and let him take it. He is the best.
Perfect.
Thank you, Terry. Thanks, Al, for the question, and thanks to any of the guys who are here today. Look, this is not terribly complicated on this specific question for P&A. Everything that has been asked for so far by the panel, all the things that Grace went through as far as what you can do to help pass this law, that's a thing that any guy can do. In fact, you know, there's a lot of guys in Springfield who need to hear from men like you on these issues. So you just don't think it's a woman's issue. And so for this particular case, it's really straightforward. Make calls to your legislators, share on social media about the issue, share the website, talk to your friends, and join us for Zoom parties talking with members of the state house or state senate. Fairly straightforward. In a broader sense, if the question is beyond just how do I help get P&A repealed? The answer to that question is, again, to listen to the people who are most impacted, the women and all those who can get pregnant, who are leading this movement for reproductive freedom and reproductive justice more broadly, and to do the things that they are asking us to do, which again takes us back to the first part of this, which is we've been asked by Grace and by Emily and by Al and everybody else to talk to our legislators, to share about this publicly. Don't be afraid as a male ally to speak up, but recognize that our place is to support as partners and also to speak to our peers. The most value you can bring right now is to make sure that other men in your life are speaking up on this issue as well and help shoulder some of this burden that those who can get pregnant have been carrying mostly alone for most of the last several decades.
Thank you, Orrin. And I love that you said, you know, man or woman, however you identify, you have the ability to call your legislator and reach out and ask and, you know, say that you're supportive of this, and, you know, it takes allies on all ends. So thank you for that. We have a lot of folks asking questions about how do young people afford abortions? What is the cost to have an abortion? And kind of understanding that cost and that, you know, kind of burden to entry. Does anyone have some details on that? And, you know, I'll share interestingly, and I think some of you know I happen to sell health insurance for a living. Ironically, we had a client call earlier today sharing a very personal story with us, and that she is pregnant and she is seeking some assistance, and this is not something she can share with her parents, and she happens to be in her 20s, so this P&A doesn't come into place, but she's still younger. And my staff was also helping me practice for this event. We were looking at the slides and we thought how ironic and that this happened all in the same day, that we had a young person reaching out to us for assistance, and we know that her health insurance plan does not cover it. So I think this is not only a question for young people that would fall under the P&A regulations from this act, but it also is an important question for young folks who do have the ability to go on their own, you know, to have an abortion, but want to understand a little bit more about that cost and, you know, where are places where you can, you know, safely have access. And I know that Melissa, Bridget, Terry, Emily, please, I know many of you, you know these answers and have some good thoughts around it.
Cost is a huge barrier for patients of all ages. As was mentioned by Senator Castro, there's the Hyde Amendment at the federal level, which fortunately we did address at the state level with HB 40 a few years ago. So now Medicaid, those who have Medicaid insurance can get abortion coverage in Illinois, and in the RHA, we made it so that many, but not all, private insurance plans in Illinois are also supposed to cover abortion. But there are still some people who don't have insurance, or whose insurance doesn't cover abortion, or who can't use their insurance because they're not the policyholder and they don't want the person who is the policyholder to know that they're getting abortion care. So cost remains a huge hurdle for people of all ages, and especially for young people. There are a lot of really tremendous resources out there to help with things like cost. The Chicago Abortion Fund is doing fantastic work trying to help people get over those hurdles for those cost-related hurdles. And Midwest Access Coalition, which is one of the co-sponsors of the event, helps with costs that are not the cost of the procedure itself, but things like transportation or an overnight stay if you're coming from a long distance. The National Abortion Federation is another organization that provides funding assistance, and Planned Parenthood, also of Illinois, has really dug deep to provide some very generous assistance for young people in particular who may not be able to use their insurance or don't have insurance coverage. So there are definitely resources out there. It is often a big hurdle. It kind of takes a village. It takes all of us coming together, and a little bit from here and a little bit from there to pull together what we need to help a young person access that abortion care when they can't use their insurance and they can't ask their parents for help. And we've absolutely had clients who don't have $10 to their name at that moment in time. And so we all come together, all of us from the different communities and organizations that do this work to try to find a way, basically.
I'd like to add on to what Emily said. All what she said is totally true. As far as cost, the cost really can vary And there are a lot of things that are factored into it, what stage of pregnancy the person is in, whether or not they have sedation, et cetera. And it's not just, as Emily mentioned, the cost of the procedure, but there are many areas of the state where abortion is not accessible. So travel is involved, and that can be costly as well. One of the issues with cost that is connected with parental notice is the issue of delays. Part of cost with abortion is what stage of pregnancy you're in, how many weeks along the pregnancy is. If you are delayed because you are trying to get into court, you have to make arrangements, you can't make it to court that week, you're gonna have to put it off another week. Suddenly the cost of the abortion can increase by $100 or more. And for patients who are already facing challenges finding money, a delay of a couple of days getting into court can turn into hundreds of dollars that they don't have. So that is another impact that makes it so that some young people can't get what they need because they're being delayed.
Thank you for that, Bridget. And Emily and Bridget, I asked that if you have any resources or good websites that folks can visit to understand where they can get access to funds or access to resources like rides. If you could drop those into the chat, that would be really helpful. We definitely had quite a few people that asked about that. And, you know, I know just even today with my client that I was experiencing, Emily, you really spoke to that, where this is her parents' policy. And if she does it on this policy, it'll be seen and understood. And so depending on a person's situation, one of the things that I've noticed, you know, part of the Affordable Care Act, one of the great things about it is it covers kids until they're 26. A 26-year-old child is an adult child who, and these are mostly the children, you know, 21 to 26 that we see at my agency who are asking for help and resources, and we're, you know, happy to be a resource. And there's been a couple doctors that have chimed in and a couple people from various clinics. Allison from Hope Clinic is here with us, and, you know, she's in the Metro East area, and they actually have the judicial bypass process on their website. A lot of these clinics are providing the resources needed to help young people through that process. And so I ask that if there's any good links that you can provide and share, please do so, you know, here in the comments. We have a question for the folks at NOW, so I'm gonna look towards Ed and also Iris for this one. But, you know, folks wanna know, as NOW members, what is the best way for them to take a next step, and what does that look like? And so Ed or Iris, if someone's a NOW member, and what is their best way to engage in that process? I know that, you know, Grace talked about great ways to amplify and share and connect. What are some of the ways that you're asking that the NOW members dive in?
Well, I'd like to have Laura Welsh jump in on that, if she doesn't mind.
That would be great. For those of you that don't know Laura, she runs Illinois Now. So Iris and Ed are with a local chapter, but Laura is like the big kahuna Illinois Now gal. And so we're getting the official Illinois version. So Laura, thank you so much for being here with us. And what are the best ways for Now members to dive in?
First of all, thanks for calling me the big kahuna. I've always wanted to be one. First of all, if you're not a NOW member, go to ilnow.org and you can join. We focus on 6 pillar issues, and in addition to abortion. So there's a lot that we do. If you are a NOW member, obviously the first thing that we want you to do is to find out who your legislator is, your legislators, and call them. If they're already a co-sponsor or already supportive, call them and thank them. That's one thing that we tend to forget, is that we need to make sure that our folks that are supporting our issues know that we really appreciate what they're doing. And then I would take a look at further, if they're not a supporter, find out if they are one of those folks on the bench, and have a Zoom meeting. Bring someone with you if you're not comfortable. If you've never talked to a legislator before, call someone who's a leader in your chapter. You know, they probably have done it before, and they can go with you. They can Zoom with you. They can be on the phone with you. That's very important. Write emails. Tell your friends to write emails. Find out who else is in your district that is a NOW member or not a NOW member. Maybe you can go with them go with them on a Zoom and just bring more people in. That's really what we do it now, is bring as many voices as we can to each issue that we deal with. So those, I think, would be the main things. If you are a NAIL member but don't know what your chapter is, you can get a hold of our executive director, Susan Bramlett-Lavin. You can go to the website, ilnow.org, and we can link you with your chapter. Just keep calling, keep writing, send postcards. That's what's really important right now.
I love that, Laura. Thank you. And I will note that we have, and I'm sure you've noticed, we've had a handmaid with us this evening. And often, and I find we see this in many of our organizations, where not everyone is comfortable getting out front, calling legislators, maybe doing those Zooms. And Laura, you were just speaking to that. I've had the privilege of joining several organizations and getting to be a handmaid. It is one of the most powerful things you can do without actually speaking at the same time. And so I know that some folks aren't, super vocal. They're not those extroverts. And so in that scenario, in that case, you can be a handmaid. I know that it's really cold outside these days, and so staging handmaids, outside is a little bit tricky, but I know that there'll be opportunities like that where we will gather and we will be able to be heard on our pro-choice values. And so be on the lookout for also quiet ways to participate as well. And kind of depending on your personality, you can engage differently. So a question for kind of the Personal PAC crew. And so Personal PAC, first of all, many of us have the privilege of working with you and coordinating with you. This is the main agenda piece for Personal PAC this year. Are there any other pro-choice bills, and this could be for Personal PAC, ACLU, Planned Parenthood, are there any other pro-choice bills on the table that we should have our eyes on? I know that our legislators are currently filing legislation right now. Are there any other bills we should have our eyes on that your organizations are focused on that share our pro-choice values?
For Personal PAC, this is it. I mean, this is our #1 and only legislative priority. And we've taken the position that we don't even want to discuss anything else until this is done, because for 2 reasons. It is so absolutely critical because, as we've heard all, for the last hour and 15 minutes, just the pure terror and horror that this bill or this law imposes. And that isn't to say other laws and bills don't, but for us as a single issue organization, this is really it. And also it is really one of the final pieces of, what I point out to people all the time is that everything that we've done with HB 40, the RHA, and now this, and I'm putting that in quotes, all we're really doing is undoing all the damage that has been done to access to reproductive health care since really 3 years after Roe, because shortly after that, the Hyde Amendment was adopted, and then year after year after year. In Illinois, it was in the late 70s, early 80s when spousal consent and all the other restrictions that the RHA repealed were piled on top of the people of Illinois, and as well as many other states and at the federal level. So I know that the ACLU and Planned Parenthood have a wider agenda than parental notice. At least that's what I believe from their emails and conversations. So I imagine Bridget has something to say to that. So I will stop and let her answer that. And I know, and I'm going to jump in, and I just want to say, I know that repealing parental notice is a huge priority for not only Planned Parenthood, the ACLU, but also NOW. And I just want to express on behalf of Personal PAC and myself personally, doing this for 32 years, how much I appreciate everyone on this Zoom tonight and all the other organizations that are really jumping on, because I think one of the important things is I think every legislator knows that the usual suspects, ACLU, Planned Parenthood, NOW, Personal PAC, that we're all supportive of this, but I think it is the growing number of organizations that are stepping up, that are represented here tonight, and so many others, is really going to get the legislators' attention. That this isn't just the usual suspects, that there are so many other people in organizations that are stepping up. So before I pass it on to Bridget, thank you very much, everyone, for being here tonight and being part of this incredible effort.
Thanks, Terry. Of course, this is a top issue for Planned Parenthood, as I know it is for many of the organizations involved here tonight and many of the organizations that we partner with. We also have a couple other things that we are working on this session. As you may remember, the Trump administration cut off family planning funding to Planned Parenthood and many other providers across the country. We did get some state funding for family planning, and we want to continue that into the next fiscal year if we can, because it's not going to be a quick fix at the federal level. The Biden administration has vowed to reverse that policy, but it's going to take a little while because they made changes to the program at the federal level. So it's going to be a little bit. The other thing is we have a couple state level things that are policies. We are supporting the Responsible Education for Adolescent and Children's Health Act, which is an age appropriate, medically accurate and inclusive sex education bill for grades K through 12. It would require sex ed in grades K through 12. And last but not least, we are very supportive of several policies related to improving maternal health and addressing Black maternal health disparities. We were disappointed that the healthcare pillar of the Black Caucus agenda ran out of time during the lame duck, but we know that that has been reintroduced, and we're very happy that we've been working with folks like Senator Castro, who spoke earlier on maternal health legislation, and we're very optimistic that we can get some good policies in place this session. So we have a full plate, but we are more than committed to work on all of them, including parental notice. And I'll just give a plug here that it has been 25 years for me since I was in that gallery when parental notice passed in the House, and I and my colleagues in that gallery were all broke down in tears because we knew what that meant. We've been working for 25 years to get rid of this thing, and we need to do it now.
Bridget, we look forward to crying for joy with you in the gallery when we get this repealed. So thank you for that. Lots of great legislation to work on, and I can't wait to celebrate this repeal with everyone. We had a couple questions about that legislation and that process. I'm going to answer a couple of those quickly, and I know that we're running, we're coming towards the end of our event, and I want to make sure we have enough time to answer the couple questions we have. So someone asked about the role of witness slips. So as legislation goes through its process, it has to be called a certain amount of times in each chamber in order for it to go to the other side and then later go to the governor's desk. And so during the time of which it's being heard in committee, and so prior to things going to the floor, and you just heard Bridget talking about being in this gallery, the gallery she's talking about is an area where you can sit above where the legislators do their work on the floor. This is where the votes happen. And so in this scenario, prior to getting to that portion of the vote where it's called on the floor, a bill needs to go to committee. And it's assigned to a committee where the committee makes the decision if it should leave committee to then go to the floor. And it needs to go through these several calls. It needs to be read 3 times. So those readings are done in committee and then later on the floor. And so in this case, while it's going to committee, there's a time period where you can fill out witness slips. Again, later, there's another window to do witness slips. But witness slips are your moment as an everyday person or your moment as an organization leader to put your name or you and your organization's name on the line saying, we're for this or we're against it. Earlier, you heard Terry talking about the antis, and they come together in droves and they hit all of the legislators and they get their dials in and they get their witness slips in. He was talking about us being better mobilizers, us being better organizers. So the day that the witness slips hit, we do that amplification that Grace talked about. We tell 3 to 5 friends, here's the link, go there, tell them you support the repeal. And so witness slips are the way that legislators know that people, everyday people and or organizations understand where you are at on a particular bill. And you can be for or against a bill. And that's the witness slip process. I know that a lot of organizations here will rally people to do slips. You might see Personal PAC hit out a big email blast saying, go do the witness slip today, or now we'll do that. I know that the organization I founded, We Will, does that all the time as well. And so be on the lookout for those days when we need to do witness slips, because as Terry mentioned, the other side gets their people mobilized to be anti, and we need to be out there showing that there's more of us and that more people want repeal, and that's really important. So great question. Thank you for that, Susan. Another question that's come in, and I think that, you know, this particular question has actually come up a lot in the circles that I've been talking in, and that question is, if there's a complication during this young person's abortion, does that trigger another phase where parents are then contacted? And a lot of conversations I've had lately, you know, and I've had quite a these conversations with dads and, you know, a community of parents in my area, and immediately everyone thinks about their own daughter. That's kind of the first mindset that comes, and we sometimes go down a path where maybe that, you know, we're not thinking about, you know, the people that are affected by this, the young people that are affected, and that it's not about just our daughter, but, you know, it's about more than just that one person. And so with that, there is the concern that during an abortion there can, you know, obviously with access comes safety, but sometimes there is something that happens. And so we've had a couple of folks ask if you know, we repeal it, will there be another layer where there's resources for that young person, and if there is a problem that happens? Does anyone have, I know that, I don't know if Emily, if maybe this is maybe a good question for you.
Sure, absolutely. So I will say that, you know, first of all, abortion is an extremely safe medical procedure. It is considerably safer than giving birth. And yet we don't require pregnant minors who decide to continue their pregnancy and give birth to involve their parents unless they choose to do so. A pregnant minor who experiences a complication during labor can decide to have their parents know and be involved, or can decide not to. So there's really no difference. There's really no reason to treat a young person differently when the medical care that they're seeking related to pregnancy is an abortion, as opposed to, you know, prenatal or childbirth care. The other thing I'll say is that, you know, part of the process of getting an abortion is learning about the procedure. A standard part of all abortion care is counseling about the procedure. Although it is an extremely safe procedure, like any healthcare, there are some possible risks. It's getting education about what those risks are, what the warning signs are, what you can do if you have concerns in terms of returning to the clinic or seeking emergency care if necessary. Every patient gets that, and that includes young patients. All young patients get that as well. And so, no, if this law were repealed and a minor did have an abortion and did experience a complication, it would remain up to the minor to decide at that point if what they need to do in that moment is involve a parent or not. But there is no reason that minors are not capable of making that call, just as they're capable of making the call about, you know, complications in prenatal care or in delivery or postpartum. And I liked what you said, Al, about the fact that, you know, of course, parents want to be involved in their children's lives, and they hope and want their children to involve them in a decision such as what to do when there's an unplanned pregnancy. But the majority of young people voluntarily will choose to do that with or without a law. Well, we need to think about those young people whose family situations are dangerous or precarious, or for whatever reason, you know, introducing this into the family dynamic is going to ultimately be unhealthy or unsupportive. It would lead to an unhealthy or unsupportive situation for the young person. Those young people are forced to either notify someone that they know they probably shouldn't and suffer the consequences, or go through this, you know, drawn out, potentially traumatizing judicial bypass process, neither of which should be acceptable to us. And so it's really critical that we get rid of this law and, you know, trust the young people who are seeking abortion care the same way that we do with young people who are seeking other pregnancy related care, to know who to involve and who will support them and who is their best resource and trusted ally. And most of the time that will be a parent, but not always.
Thank you, Emily. I want to kick this back to Iris. And before that, just thank you everyone for being here. It is so important that we support the young folks in our communities. You know, they rely on us. You know, these folks are not old enough to vote. Their voice is now not always at the table, and so we're here for them. And I'm just so grateful to work with all of you on this important legislation. Iris, Ed, you guys are amazing. This Now chapter is just doing such fantastic stuff. So proud to get to collaborate with your organization, be involved in coalitions. Iris, I want to kick it back to you. And Ed, we had, for those of you that were with us earlier, we had the opportunity to hear Kristen Lems. I had a little bit of a tech issue, so I'm going to let Ed take over that last song so I don't accidentally mess up our sound or anything. But Iris, thank you. Your chapter is fantastic.
Thank you. So to close out, I just wanted to say that I'm grateful to every participant and all the co-sponsors who joined us tonight. And I want to especially thank Emily and Melissa for sharing their expertise with us. And I also want to especially thank Ed and Al and Grace and Laura for their time and energy to help make this event a success. We have listed all our co-sponsors who came together. This is truly a feminist collaboration. So check out the websites of other organizations and sign up to join them. And now you can enjoy more music from Kristen Lems as we share our slides again to end the program. Thanks and good night.
I want to sing a song for you that I wrote a mere 3 weeks ago. It's been kind of reverberating around the country in the different state campaigns. It goes like this. I am asking everything you have to give. I am asking everything you have to give. We will never give up. We will never give up. We will never give in. We will never give in. We will never give up. We will never give up. We will never give in. We will never give in. You will lose your youth, your sleep, your arches, your strength, your patience, your sense of humor, and occasionally the love and support of people you love very much. But we will never